This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. We speak from our personal experiences and opinions. The views expressed are solely those of the individual speaker and are not intended to malign any group, club, organization, or business.
Welcome back to Confronting the Line. We are here to explore the world of personal development and examine the often blurry line between transformation and exploitation. We are dedicated to finding that line, looking, listening, and learning in service of safer seeking for all of us lifelong learners. Hi, my name's Ann L. Peterson, and I'm the author of the book, Is This a Cult? Let's get started. So, some of you have been tracking us with our season 1, I guess it was. And so here we are at the opener season 2. And I want to start with a little bit of business. First and foremost, Mark Tafoya has moved on to other endeavors and will no longer be producing the show with me. I want to give a huge, huge shout out of appreciation for his time and his talent. I never would have had the courage to start the show without his support. Huge thank you to Mark and best of luck in all your future endeavors. And I want to introduce and big welcome for Tony Barros-Limon, who has stepped in as new partner and producer of the show with me. Tony is a former Landmark staff member, married to a former longtime staff member. He led seminars for a period of time, and he now spends his time supporting and working with special ed kids. And, Tony is going to be with us sometimes on camera, oftentimes off camera, whatnot. We've been thinking and playing and imagining kind of what we're going to do here in this next season. And we'll talk more about that. That's the purpose of this show today, is to kind of have a little bit of a look back of what the first season, what the first episode, what the first year really since my book came out, because it's just about a year ago, here coming up March 7th. Will be 1 year since I published my book. And so we're going to look a little bit at that, and we're going to look at what we see going forward for Confronting the Line, and why after a bit of a break, I decided, it's important to keep going. And Tony has just been a big part of that process, because right before my book came out, I had been introduced to by a mutual friend, Tony and his wife, and just started talking. And he's one of those very small handful of people that I was sort of free to sort of talk with about what was opening up, what I was discovering, what I was processing as I really dealt with that Landmark, the group that I had given really the majority of my adult life to at that point wasn't maybe everything that it seemed or that I thought it was. It just working through that. And so Tony and his wife both have been really good friends and confidants in that process. So it turns out that Tony has produced a number of videos and audios and all that stuff. I'm like, oh my God, come play with me. I don't like to play by myself, in case you haven't all figured that out. I'm a we thinker. I'm a we person. So I just really appreciate you, Tony, for stepping in. Anything you want to say by way of just introduction to folks?
Well, number one, thank you for having me. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm excited to talk to everyone and kind of forward this conversation. I think like Anne, I don't have a vendetta against Landmark, but I do want people to be safe and people to know what they're getting into before they just jump right in and give up their entire lives for something that might necessarily be what they think it is, or have their best intentions at heart when they're jumping in. And frankly, I'd like to see some reform in the space in general, right? Have something where it's regulated in some way, shape, or form, or it's that people are actually paying attention to, that people are messing with other people's brains, literally changing the chemical processes that are happening in people's brains, and that there's no one kind of regulating that is crazy to me.
At least some kind of an accountability structure, right? That some kind of a check and balance. That's what regulations fundamentally are, right? I know there's people out there who say the word regulation, they freak out. I personally have, at 56 and having raised a number of children, have a deep appreciation for guardrails, which is to me what regulations are. And and now I'm learning all about boundaries, like what that really means. And, to have a healthy experience in this human condition, boundaries and regulations and guardrails are really important. I have just such an appreciation for that now. And look, you're talking to Miss Rebel, I've always considered myself as a rebel, as a outside the box person. But
And I mean, you know me as your resident punk rock friend, so like I'm right there with
there you
you.
go. That's awesome. Well, Tony, I think I want to, so kind of before we dip into where we're going to be looking in this next year that you and I have been
Yep.
talking about, let's visit a little bit about where we've been
Yeah.
and maybe just take some time to reflect on that a bit because sometimes we've been so in it. And I know for me, taking this kind of break, so I took a holiday break. Was like, hey, I'm going to just take some time off here. From there, I don't know. I've seen a lot like that. The first thing I've seen is how important that is. And so I just want to start by kind of asking you. So you were like, we were just kind of getting to know each other and friends. And then my book came out. You were one of the small group of people that knew it was coming out because I was super scared that, Lambert was going to try to stop me. And just mostly because I used the C word, which everybody's been using around them for years and years and years and years. Part of why I did it is because people have been asking that question, but not people from the inside. And
Yeah.
that's what I was doing for all those years. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I kind of wish I would have called it, wait, is this a call? Because that was what I was sort of dealing with. Like, that's what got me into the exploration. I now think it's not even the most important question, or it's not that it's irrelevant exactly. It's just that cult is around us everywhere. Like, especially right now, we're seeing it in our society at large.
Yeah.
But why don't you, just so folks can get to know you, what's it been like for you? Like, what have you noticed since you sort of confronted the question? And then all the fallout since the book came out, which for our listeners that maybe don't know, is literally hundreds of people in groups, in private groups mostly. They're not ready to be public yet, but have come forward and started to question and talk. And for me, I mean, for a solid 5 months, I think I spent 5 days a week, 6 days a week, many hours a day, just fielding phone calls and messages and whatnot, almost entirely with thank yous. Oh my God, thank you for talking about this out loud. Thank you for bringing this up. And anyway, I'll pause there.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so there's just been a lot that happened since the book came out in our community.
Yeah.
So just maybe by way, tell us a little bit how it's been for you.
So what's interesting is I've said this, and this is obviously anecdotal, right? But I don't know how truly anecdotal it is, but I can count on one hand the number of people that left staff or left being a program leader with a positive experience or a positive kind of experience of Landmark, right? Generally speaking, if you get enough staff members together, eventually they'll break off from whatever's happening around them to have conversations about what their experience was like. And something that's really common in those conversations is that people thought it was just them. You'll hear that a lot, is that like, I thought it was just happening to me. I didn't realize that there was other people. And I know that I'm kind of repeating what a lot of people have said throughout the season already, but I want to reiterate that point for people that are out there listening. There is a level of like compartmentalization that happens within the way that people are treated at Landmark that people don't even know it's happening, or they just think it's them. And then the other thing as well is they think that whatever's happening, they don't want to ruin the work, right? So there's like, I was abused, I was this, I was that. They'll tell you these stories, but then when it came time to it, I didn't do anything because at the end of the day, I still believe in the mission. I still believe in what they're doing, right? So for me, I think, and the biggest thing for me is that I've been dealing with since the book came out is, I was a true believer. I'm what I consider myself a true believer. I was that. I got pulled into Landmark. I had never even heard of it when I didn't know what I was walking into when I walked in on day one. I had no idea. I didn't go to an intro. I didn't look it up. Someone just said you should do it. I'll pay for it. I was like, great, I'm there. And so I did the Landmark Forum and I was like immediately hooked. And looking back now, I'm shocked a little bit about how quickly I got sucked in and how it didn't take anything. Like, I mean, it like literally didn't take anything. And I was like, you cannot keep me away from this stuff, right?
Do you have any thoughts about, just curious about why that is? Like, because I know you're a part of our book club group on Facebook where we've been talking a lot, and we've been having almost weekly calls now for, several months with lots of people and kind of exploring some of these things. So just curious, because I think what you're describing there is experience for a lot of people, not just in Landmark, but in other large group awareness trainings and groups, right? So, and yeah, just any thoughts about that now, like particularly with all the learning you've been doing? I know you're in our Rachel Bernstein group. She's been teaching us a lot about kind of what happens, because
Well, I mean,
you
like
do think it's personal, but it's not personal actually.
so I did the Lamb Reform in 2005. Okay. And I can still, to this day, recall with almost exact clarity the feeling that I had in my body the moment that quote unquote transformation happens, right? The Sunday afternoon conversation in the Landmark Forum. I don't know what it is in other larger group awareness trainings, but as far as Landmark is concerned, that like I could literally feel like a wash over my body. And I've described it, to use kind of a drug term, as like chasing the dragon, right? There's like a chasing the dragon kind of thing where like I know that I have been chasing that feeling ever since I did the Lamb Reform, and I've never reached the heights of that again. But that didn't stop me from like that euphoric feeling I had for several weeks after the Lamb Reform.
This is really
And
important. Can I just pause you for a second? This is
Terry, yeah,
really,
please.
you're describing it just so well. I don't really remember that feeling that high. I do remember feeling like a relief, and whatnot. But actually, as I look back, yeah. And I read something recently, a study that said that what sticks with human beings longer than pain actually is pleasure. It is the high. And, that's why even as people go into dementia and they start to lose their memories and whatnot, but what they will remember is those precious moments, those high moments. And, Dr. John Hunter, we had him on, have him on again. He just published his book, The Dopamine Experience. And he really takes it apart neurologically. The large group awareness trainings, everybody kind of thinks it's about large group. That's not. It just mostly they happen in large groups because they use the group dynamic to create the low and the high, to create the social pressure and the social permission that is required to basically addict the brain. That is fundamentally what happens in these kinds of trainings that are structured this way. It's much more about the structure, the intense timeline, the close proximity, like literally even how you're sitting in a room, not being allowed to take notes, etc. So that's what, and we'll explore that further. That's some of the things that we're going to look at is we're going to dig a little deeper this season into what some of this stuff is as we're learning and coming to understand it, because it doesn't live just in land. It lives in lots of different kinds of setups and situations. Because just like the guys that figured out if you put those extra few ingredients in those cigarettes and you put all that sugar in that Coca-Cola and you addict the brain, and then people keep consuming. So these trainings work very much that same way. And you just described it so well. And you don't remember the details, but you do remember the feeling.
Exactly. And as someone who's quit sugar multiple times over the years, I can tell you that when you have sugar again for the first time after a prolonged period of not having sugar, you can literally feel that same wash over your body, that your brain is like, yes, that's what we like. Let's give you more of that, please. And it's wild. It's wild. I mean, it's honestly wild. And you ride that high for a while. I mean, I remember it was a good 2 weeks I was on that high. You couldn't get me down,
The few studies that have been done say 7 to 10 days is the average of that high, that kind of high experience, which doesn't mean, I do want to give a shout out. We are on the line here, so we acknowledge the good stuff too. So during those 7 days, during that high, just like in a manic high, if you have bipolar disorder or whatnot, you could produce some miracles. Like you could do some really, it almost feels like a roll of the dice, whether you do damage or do miracles. Sometimes you do a little bit of both. So, but what I mean by is you go out and you start taking actions and doing things. There's a kind of a joke amongst the circuit about the level of divorce in the large group awareness training circuit is pretty dang high. And look, sometimes that was a good thing. In my case, that was a good thing, right? My husband was cheating on me. He was abusing my son. It was like all this stuff. But so that was a good thing to divorce that. But I know a lot of people who that wasn't necessarily the case. And that's just one little example. But you don't, you take a lot of action. So I don't want to dismiss that during that fallout of a program like the forum and like the advanced course, those are the two inside of Landmark that are clear large group awareness trainings, the way they're structured. Then everything builds off of that, but it isn't necessarily structured as a large group awareness training. But you then are you're taking actions, you're engaged, you're getting a new language, you're being indoctrinated with a whole new language, a world of meaning is assigned to that. It is straight up like I asked ChatGPT, Tony, about brainwashing. Like, what is it really? Oh my God. It was
You
scary.
look so nice.
Like,
You were being so
straight
naughty.
up
I'm not
brainwashing, I swear. Not. Anyway. So there you are. So yeah, I'm sorry, I know I kind of interrupted your train of thought, but you were saying like
No,
such good.
I was gonna move on to like, fast forward, years of participating, going on staff, being a program leader, being a seminar leader. I got married to, at the time, a staff member. So her and I are still married. And I think this is not an uncommon thing for people who meet at Landmark, is that they use the Landmark distinctions as pillars for their marriage, right? Especially when you talk to people who are staff members or program leaders alike. And generally speaking, if you're a staff member, you're likely dating other staff members or you're dating
You have
program.
to. You don't have any time
That's
for
kind of
anybody.
like there's no way around it, right? Like being in a relationship with someone who's not a graduate just isn't gonna. It's just not gonna work because of
Well,
the
we've
demand
heard
on your
many people
time.
tell it. Sorry.
Yeah. No,
We've
it's
heard
okay.
many people tell us that they were even told as staff members, particularly or high level program leaders, like if you get in a relationship with somebody who is not deeply involved, it's not going to turn out. Like, so don't do that. I
Yeah,
mean,
don't
not
waste
everybody
your
said
time.
that. Yeah. It's not an
Yeah.
official company line, but it's
Right.
definitely in culture. My
Yeah, it's
wedding
definitely
was a leadership program project, it was a community project.
yeah. I mean, like everyone in our wedding party was either a staff member or a program leader. I mean, like across the board, it just becomes the water you swim in it, right? So my wife and I both built our vows. Everything about our relationship is built inside of the tenets of Landmark, using the distinctions of Landmark. So what happens to your relationship when that no longer jives, right? When you were like, wow, well, this is kind of BS, right? This isn't really going to work. And frankly, like my wife and I have had a really difficult time since that, right? Like it's been one of the major things that her and I have been dealing with is, well, if our relationship isn't grounded in the tenets of this work, then what is it? What is our relationship, right? And so we've been trying to kind of, for lack of a better way of saying it, reinvent our relationship. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
I didn't want to use that kind of phrasing, but like I don't have another way of saying it, right? Like
Reinventing is great.
yeah.
It's not
So
really a landmark brand.
we, like one of these we're going to be doing here, like we have Valentine's Day coming up this week for when we're recording this, and we're planning on reviewing our vows, kind of going through our vows one by one and how they relate to something that is a landmark, right? Like, and if we can't find it kind of anywhere outside of Landmark, then we're going to get rid of it and replace it with something else. And that's kind of what we have to do, right? And we're not like trying
what
to.
what you're talking about, what you're describing is what's kind of becoming known as deconstruction.
Absolutely.
So when you are get involved in something, anything, a group, an ideology, and look, this can happen at conventional workplaces, right? And although there's a lot more guardrails in there, so that's not usually quite so bad, but it can be. I just read Sarah Nippy did this great set of series on the Bridgewater book called The Fund about Ray Dalio, and he organized this whole company as basically as a cult. So these kind of destructive patterns can really happen anywhere because look, if you can addict a workforce and get them to, be your sales force, your workforce, your everything, promote your business, build equity in your business, name of the game is to do that at the lowest cost possible and the highest profit possible. And one of the ways that we now understand, one of the things that can be used to get people to do all that is possibility. It is mission. It is like that. But groups like Landmark taking an extra step. They take it to, and this is common language in Landmark, you are to become the enterprise. That's what it is to be accountable for. Is you are becoming that program leader body. You are becoming it. It is replacing your identity, yourself with that. Now, building that on as an addition, I don't know. We can talk about that. Maybe we'll do a whole episode about that. Is that dangerous or not dangerous? But I do know replacing yourself with that self that's where we're in brainwashing territory. That's
Well,
and you have to deconstruct that, or you will carry it forward. And you may
well, I mean, that's,
change things. Maybe you don't strangle people. Maybe you don't employ people at,
yeah,
well below minimum wage and work them at, like some of the more gratuitous and gross practices that we've been revealing.
yeah,
Maybe you don't do those things, but you will carry forward the kind of thinking that allows for that builds that provides the permission structure for that at the least. And then I don't know about you, but I keep finding other ways where I just fully internalize that thinking in ways that kind of don't work out.
sure.
They definitely don't work outside that environment, outside that
Yeah.
culture.
Well, how do I say this? I've talked about, outside of our conversations, but I talk about like the kind of guilt that I feel for my role in kind of furthering the culture of Landmark, right? Because like I'm not immune. Like I think if you want to be successful in any way, shape, or form, you kind of have to. I mean, like if you're part of that world, right, you have to be. And I remember it's kind of surreal for me to look back on how I was when I was in a kind of official Landmark capacity and like as a staff member or as a program leader. That's not me at all. You know what I mean? Like I'm a like a really kind of soft spoken, laid back kind of guy. I don't really raise my voice. I don't really get angry. I'm an incredibly patient, empathetic person, right? So that I was like basically a hammer for every nail I saw is like crazy to me. Like it just is crazy to me. And like I wonder if bringing more of myself and less of what the quote unquote enterprise or that distinction would have been better. You know what I mean? Like from just a natural expression, right?
Certainly would have been
And
more consistent with what is supposed to be sort of one of the core, I don't know if I call it a core value, but for sure one of the core deliverables, as it were, for the products of Landmark, which is that you are freed up to be your self-expression. Now,
correct.
I can tell you a little bit about what the definition of self-expression. You can see where that kind of falls apart, because in the world definition is it's an expression of the self. It's an expression of Tony and it's our unique, spin and our looking and our expression that feels the most, I call it my soulful self. Like it's more aligned with my values, what I create as a autonomous person with free will. That's how we think of self-expression outside. In the Landmark culture, self-expression is having access to all ways of being, which you start to break that down. It's like now, and if you learn a little bit about sociopathy, it's like, wait, maybe I was trying to be a little sociopath, like that I could pull on any way of being and acting for any situation, which sounds good on the surface, but what's happening to the soul? What's happening to who we are and who we know ourselves in the midst of, like, these are the kind of questions we're going to look at this year.
Well, one of just to throw my 2 cents in that, one of the things that they say that self-expression is like getting rid of anything that's in the way between you and expressing yourself with another human being, right? So what that looks like is, how do I present that way to other people so that I appeal to the broadest group of people, right? So there's automatically, while there is a certain level of like expressing yourself, mostly it's like you're trying to make everyone as kind of generic as possible, if that makes sense. Like everyone has to have the same look, the same kind of feel, because it's going to appeal to the broadest audience. And then you get someone who walks in, and you have someone who walks in with green hair, and it's like, whoa, I can't be with that because I have something about someone with green hair. But it's like but that's an expression for them. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I feel that like the definition that Landmark uses is a little more stifling than anything else, but we can dissect that a little bit more.
Okay, Tony, let's put that on the list. Let's do a show about the idea of self-expression. Like, what is that really? And what, kind of that's what this is what you and I are talking about right now. This is what deconstruction looks like. Questioning those beliefs. And one of my absolute favorite people on the planet that I follow is a guy by the name of Jim Palmer. Amazing Facebook feed. He's got a Substack now called Deconstruction. I really learned a lot about deconstruction from him. And his particular bent is he's a religion deconstructor. So he was a big
Okay.
mega pastor in Nashville. And he just started to notice after like 20 some years, does this sound familiar, dude? About 20 some years, he starts to notice like that his parishioners, that his flock, is having the same problem as that, like all of his, sermons and all of the doctrine and all of the ideas and all of the belief set wasn't really delivering on what he thought it would, as a young pastor. Like it wasn't working basically. And so that's when he started to question, and he's written several books. My favorite one is Inner Anarchy, The Inner Anarchist. But that's where I really started to learn about deconstruction from and fundamentally it's as simple as questioning. And what's cool when you question is you'll find bits and bobs that are worth keeping, like, oh, I get it. Or you'll even discover an even deeper understanding of the idea, because organizations like Landmark and leaders like Warner, they don't think this stuff up. They take existing ideas and they take parts and they tweak them. And then you've heard the term word salad. Word salad is basically where you take something that is already and give it a whole other way of talking about it to try and say that it's something new, mostly so you can modify it. Now, part of that is the way our capitalist system is set up. Right. I will say I am a capitalist. I'm not against capitalism, for the record, but I do think there might be some better ideas out there, open to that too. But that whole process of making it mine so I can become the center and sell it and then get as many people as I can to follow me. Why are they doing that? Is that for you? I don't think so. And we're seeing this play out in society, and it's not going to not happen. I think that's fantastic fantasy thinking, but I do think that we can educate ourselves, and we can exercise our will and our autonomy in the midst of that. And we can start to, we can pull the cream off the top and leave the rest behind. I've spoken to hundreds of graduates too, that they've done that. Like, pretty much where the destructive aspects of Landmark come into play is when you get into an accountability position. Before that, there's things that can be unhealthy for people, but mostly it's not dangerous to your autonomy, to your health and well-being, to your until you start taking some accountability in the organization, which, used to happen through the volunteer program and the leadership program. And then that's when you start to supplant your identity, yourself, with their homogeneous, palatable to everybody, sell anyone, fixing the world. What else have we discovered? Anything else you said? So I really got what you're saying about you leave an organization like this and the things in your life that were constituted inside of that, like you got to reconstitute them. Dave and I have had to do this. Yeah. We got a marriage counselor during the pandemic, which happened to coincide when people started coming to me about the abuse that was happening around Werner, which that's what triggered me to start to question and seeing that hypocrisy right at the center, right at the top. I did not know until my book came out and hundreds of people started calling me that abuse and that culture was so prevalent in Landmark, partially because I worked in a little side division that was quite different, that was based in sort of different distinctions and ideas, small, a little bit isolated, but also I didn't want to see it. I mean, my husband was the center manager for years, and he's had some really shocking revelations. Like he's been doing some EMDR and some encounters that he had as a staff member, because he now recognizes that those encounters really impacted him in deep ways. And
that's a really interesting point. And that's a really interesting point. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, no, go.
I think there's a little bit of one of the things that I've like come to realize is inside of the world of like, okay, this is a really strange thing, but like I find that I have forgotten a lot of the bad stuff, right? And it's not till somebody says something that it jogs a memory. I'm like, oh my God, I completely forgot about that ridiculously traumatic thing, because I'm like trained so much to look for the not necessarily for the good, but to complete stuff, right? And so what I'm finding is that there's a lot of work I still need to do just to resurface that stuff for myself and like look at it, take it away from the reframing, right? Like take away all the reframing that I did to make it a positive and look at it as for the destructive kind of like thing that it was, right? And I
Can you
imagine
give us
there's a
an
lot
example? Is there one kind of fresh? I know it's kind of.
so like, like being in front of the room. Like I remember being in front of the room. So one of the things for me is I'm generally a really private person. Like I'm just like by nature, I'm a private person. Like I like being in the dark. I like having the lights off. I like just like
I know I like
in my
the.
own.
I mean, I know I have all this light because I'm in Dallas and it's like sunny and bright, and he's in San Francisco, and yeah. Anyway, so he's the dark. I'm yin and yang.
I have blackout curtains in my room. I have the lights off. I have lights in my eyes, which is like just so you can see my face. But generally speaking, like I'm just kind of like an introverted, really kind of introspective but introverted person, and being put in positions where I needed to transform something. So I'm in front of the room sharing my deepest, darkest thoughts, the stuff that I have a hard time even sharing with the therapist. And I've like been put in positions where like if I expect to expand or expect to have like something move in my life to take me to the next level as a leader or whatever, I have to be in front of the room and bear this stuff to everybody and have a 2-hour conversation with somebody from the front of the room as they like rip my life to shreds for whatever thing may be happening. And that's happened so many times I can't even count, that I had to put aside my own kind of feelings about something just to have a transformation around it, right? Have something move forward, because otherwise I was out of integrity in my leading or my my being on staff or whatever. So that's traumatic, having to relive those moments and then not only that, but like airing them in front of everybody, and then having somebody like basically like rip me a new one for how like, you know what I mean? Like things like that. And then have it to like, oh, how am I responsible for this thing at the end of the day, right? Like I'm responsible for the how, right?
That's a big thing in the whole human potential, which is kind of the bucket that Landmark not only lives in, but is, I would say, a leader in that domain, in that
Pioneering for
space.
sure, yeah.
Pioneer in space, yeah. So, well, L. Ron Hubbard would be quite upset to have his pioneer title taken away. The whole idea that you've got to kind of go deep and expose all this and look, there's therapeutic models that believe that. We're just, new neuroscience, new studies starting to show us that is actually not relieving, it's re-traumatizing
for sure.
For most people. That's a fairly recent revelation. To me, one of Landmark's biggest failing, hands down, is it's failing to evolve. That it has clung so tightly to the 1970s Werner way. And that, as I've learned deeply, so since the book came out, I've had a number of people who were around during those times talk to me and share with me kind of the origins, which I, like you, didn't know. I did the Landmark Forum in 1995. And I didn't know about any of that. And even almost 10 years, 12 years of working alongside Werner, a significant amount of time, I didn't know any of that. I tried to research it, but I now know, like, he has a whole team that works over his Wikipedia page all the time. And, they've done a actually pretty dang impressive job of burying the history. But as you start to find the history, it starts to make a lot of sense. And I do want us to spend some time on that this year as we go forward. Is we're going to have a number of interviews and stuff where people are telling us the history, the background, where it comes from. I'm one of those people that does really believe that's essential. But so we're discovering that kind of work isn't always safe, but particularly not in the hands of people that have no mental health training whatsoever. I mean, there's a 100%. Few people here and there in the Landmark world that do have that training, but for the most part, not at all. The leaders don't have that. And so we're as leaders looking at trauma, we don't even know that's what we're looking at. We're not trauma. There's no formed training in the world, at least not that I'm aware of.
I remember when I was a seminar leader apprentice, an apprentice with a seminar leader program, the seminar leader from the front of the room said that trauma was a racket, which is like, whoa.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like that's a wild statement to make.
That's where people are applying. So there is a finite number of, in Landmark, they're called distinctions, right? So they're tech. So in Nexium, it's called the tech. I can't remember what it's called in Scientology, but it's the same thing, tech, distinctions, whatever. But Landmark's term is
The whole shebang,
distinction.
yeah.
So there's a finite number of those. And here's how I describe it to people. Imagine going to build a house and all you have is one screwdriver, one hammer, and maybe a handsaw.
Yep.
And but that's going to build your dream, like that, those things. So those are limited tools. And then now you're told that these are all the tools you'll ever need. These tools can be applied to anything, anywhere. That's why when you go into an introduction, you say, oh, well, I'm working on this, or I'm working on evolving my business, or I'm working on my relationship. I'm working on, can Landmark make a difference? That leader will tell you absolutely, because they have been indoctrinated in, I mean, it really is indoctrination into the idea that those tools are all you need. I've come to believe that the most dangerous thing about Landmark, aside from the primarily staff and program leaders that experience the emotional, verbal, and physical abuse, like that's okay, top shelf. No bueno. And that's what really caused my break. Like that's when I lost because I was a true believer too. But when I started learning about that, and then since my books come out, learning that it's systemic throughout the organization, I'm like, I would never send somebody to that organization ever again, because it's too embedded there, and I won't do that. But the other thing, the thing that I've come to believe is the most dangerous, is what doesn't happen because we're there. So because I'm there, and those 3 tools, those 10 tools, whatever that finite number is, it's all I will need. I'm not evolving my spiritual body. I'm not, there's a few acceptable things, like going to the gym is great, but good luck finding time. But, the culture then takes you out of some things, but the mindset takes you out of a lot. So I'm curious a bit, and it's a little bit of a plant because I've heard you talk about it, but those traumatic things, like, how do you see trauma now? Like, what's happened since you started deconstructing the Landmark layers and mindset from those things? Are those experiences still there? Like, what's happening now that you're kind of free from that? What are you seeing about those things that you transformed there?
Yeah, transformed.
We're going
The
to
idea
talk
of that being transformed
about,
is
I'm like
hilarious
on
to
a
me.
rampage against that whole mindset, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, like, okay, someone said this recently, and I 100% agree. That is such an arrogant statement to say, I am a transformed human. Like, that's such an arrogant thing to say. It's insane, right? But especially when you like, dude, I've been hearing you have the same conversations for 20 years now. Like, you haven't, I heard you share that in the seminar 15 years ago, and here you are sharing that in the seminar today. Like, you're telling me you're a transformed human. Why are you still dealing with this thing, right? And I'm sure that stings some people listening to this, but like, really, like, think about how arrogant that statement is to say I'm transformed, because that, like, I think that saying something like I'm transformed kind of cuts off the level that you can actually transform, right? Like, if you were to
the thought
change in
terminating
some
cliche. I mean, if ever there's a thought terminating cliche, that's it. I'm transformed. But where's there to go from there? And then how do you deal with the cognitive dissonance when life gives you something else or gives you the same thing? That's what I've heard a lot of, is people are like, they'll, in that 7 to 10 day period, I wrote about this a little bit in my book. Somebody's like, I cured this person of PTSD. And look, the person who said that to me is a good person, right? It's a good guy. And I'm sure it was a forum leader. I'm sure that he believed that because he only saw that person on that Sunday night or in that session where that person declares. So there's a lot in the human potential world about the power of declaration, that I can simply declare something and have it be so. Anyway, without getting nerding out on the distinctions, which we'll do whole episodes on some, on some of these ideas. They're not really going to work on Landmark distinctions per se, because we're not doing that. But we are doing these ideas because they're pervasive. So that's what I hear. I don't know about arrogance or not, but I definitely, it's like, it's an ending. And then it's really confusing when suddenly you find yourself in a not transformed situation. So what a lot of people do is they ignore those situations at their peril. They ignore them, or they don't get help, the kind of help that they need, or that can really work on that
Yes.
because I transformed that. So I can't now go seek therapy for that, or I can't now whatnot. I mean, and that's the problem. Like that person who had PTSD. I mean, anybody who understands PTSD, which I've gotten a deep education in because, as I've shared in my book in many places, my daughter suffers from complex PTSD, and that's a lifelong journey. So is addiction. So is a lot of these things, and it's not something that transformation implies that it's done, it's over, that it's complete would be the word, or that it's so changed.
Exactly.
Fundamentally, transformation means change. So it's so changed so as to never arise again, except for then it does. And you're just a little bit further back because transformation doesn't even work on you.
Yes.
Right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
what? Even like the most powerful technology in the world doesn't work on me. What the fuck's
Right.
wrong with me? I just turned our
Yeah.
episode explicit, just so you know. So now,
All good.
now where do you go?
Yeah.
And, once you're in a high control group, that's what they're called height, you go back to the group and you go, oh, it didn't work on me. Oh, well, don't worry. Just need to do this other little thing or this other course or this other integrity file, or let so-and-so coach you, or we'll send you to that person. And then basically you have another transformational moment where it's gone and then it comes back. It's gone, then it comes back. Now, do people make progress in that model? They do. I don't want to pretend they do. I'm not, it's not all bad. That's the point. It's not all bad and it ain't all good,
Yep.
but it ain't all good either, that's the part we never get to talk about that we're talking about
Yeah.
here.
So like so I've had a lot of therapy over the years, which it took me a while to find a good therapist, someone that I jived with. Right. But like once I did, like, it's been really great. And there are days where I'm really good. And there are other days that are really rough for me. I think one of the things that's been difficult is having conversations with people about their experience at Landmark, and like to really hearing the traumatic stuff and just kind of being someone that could listen to them for that. On one hand is really like healing for them. And from the flip side for me, it can be really like, okay, I need to take a break because that was horrible. That was terrible. That was like, I need a break. But like you, I'm committed to having this stuff actually get transformed. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like,
Do you
to
think
use that languaging, right? Like,
that was interesting? Yeah. I'm no longer I'm replacing transformation with evolution. That's
yeah,
because
I like that.
that's
I
more
like that.
consistent with how nature works, including the
Yeah,
nature of human, is that we shift and change and evolve. And, um, we evolve in ways and we devolve in others. Like we are not a static thing. And, but God, there was something you just said that made me think it was really, really great. Anyway, well, it'll come back or it won't. But that, you were talking about hearing people. So that's been a big thing for me too. Is like, I mean, I remember just there were nights like I was in shock, like just in shock. I remember climbing into bed, getting under as many covers as I could because I couldn't stop shaking.
yeah.
Huge shout out to Sarah Edmondson for sharing the power of baths with me. I
A
mean, I
bath,
think
bath. You say bath?
bath, she's like, take baths, and because I did an interview with them right before my book came
Yeah,
out. It released after my book came out, but it was actually before my book came out. And for me, the shift was I expected to be alienated, hated, like sued, all of this kind of stuff.
yeah,
I did not expect so many people that I'd known and loved and walked and played with over the years to reach out to me. I mean, a communication channels that didn't even know I had, and say, thank you. Thank you for talking about what we've been unable to talk about. Thank you for bringing it up. I actually heard recently that Landmark's new line about me is, we're grateful to Anne, which kudos to Mick Levitt for that one, because that's a smart way to go. And I do think they have learned a few things, mostly to put Warner back in the closet and go back under. I don't see any evidence of substantial change
sure. Yeah,
in how they operate and think, because they're fundamentally not dealing with the underlying thing, which is that deeply held cultish attachment to not just all things Warner, but like their job is to be Warner in the world. That's the origination of that enterprise, and they have not released that at all. And when he passes away, maybe they will. I doubt it, though. I think they'll consider themselves, their job is to carry it forward rather than to question it and examine it and evolve it. So to
evolve. I
me,
mean, the
I don't know.
evolution is
Well, and I'll know they're doing that. I mean, I'll know they're doing that because, like the hundreds of other people who call me, they'll reach out to talk. They'll get interested in talking to Rick Ross. They'll get interested in talking to people like me and talking to people like you, but not just to pretend to hear and, create a new era or something, but to really change it. Like, you have to do work. That's why I started my Safe Practitioner workshop, because I was like, whoa, I'm going to just carry these forward, some of these things in ways that I don't even understand. Some of these damaging or destructive ways of operating, selling, teaching, leading, I mean, I've had to put people out in front of the room and said, okay, well, tell me about that in your childhood and and I needed to go learn about that stuff. I needed to get trauma informed in a big way. And when they start doing that stuff, also when they start doing, this is one of the things I want us to talk about a lot this year. I want to do some shows. I want to bring some people on that are experts in truth and reconciliation. The truth and reconciliation process, which I think is, near as I can tell, is a much healthier, truer way to evolve something than transforming it in a weekend.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, it does require, and it's funny because some of those components are in, tell the truth. You've been an asshole. Your life doesn't work, right? That's a true thing.
Yeah.
But there's more truth than that. And truth takes time. But anyway, I digress because I was going to what it's been like to hear all these stories and know, as you're not just hearing them as somebody who has empathy and compassion and love for people, but you're also hearing them as somebody who constituted themselves as the enterprise that did that to people.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It's hard.
Because you're like, whoa, where, even if it wasn't me that was saying that terrible thing to that person or putting my hands on their throat and squeezing till they, get that, their target has to mean as much to them as their next breath. Even if that wasn't you constituted yourself, gave your talent, your time, your heart and your soul to that and to that mission and that mission and that organization and that mindset could do that. And then, and not just once, over and over and over for not 1 year, 2 years. It's been 50 years.
Yep.
And and that, I can create lots of narratives like that stuff happens elsewhere in the world and all that. I got it. But if I'd known what I know now, I never would have committed myself that far and that deep in that way.
Yep.
If I'd known, and that's my thing about the Werner history and why it's important that it be true. So that, did Werner create some great stuff and have some good ideas? And he synthesized. He's like a genius at synthesizing and making things.
Yeah.
Of course he did. Same like Michael Jackson. Amazing music. And he was a pedophile and he hurt kids, near as we can tell. Right?
Yeah.
So it's, we have to learn how to hold those things and sort it out. But listening to all of that, that's what put me under the covers, shaking, many nights actually, as I just tried to bring my own nervous system under control, because hearing hurt is hard.
Yeah. I shared with you, and thank you for sharing that. And I've shared with you that I was a big activist prior to doing Landmark, right? I was a big activist with left-wing politics and that sort of thing, obviously, because I am a punk rock pseudo-anarchist at this point. But I think the biggest thing was it took me off the streets. It took me out of doing the activism work that was near and dear to me. And so it hurt. And it still hurts, honestly, that I basically was not doing the work that I should have been doing to do work for this thing that wasn't necessarily what I signed up for, or that I didn't know I signed up for. And, having those kinds of conversations with people over the years and bending myself inside and backwards in every which way you can think of just to, I don't know, make some BS kind of promise move. I don't know, some BS promise move forward, right? Because when I started, it was LE Education 2020. That was before all the reinvention stuff.
Yeah.
So for me, the 2020 was the game, right? We're going to transform the world by 2020. And I make this joke a lot. I was like, when 2020 came, like, I understand Landmark completed that game. Like they said, we're not doing that. That's not what we're saying. But boy, oh boy, did 2020 come around and be like, woo, Landmark sure came up real short on that one.
Dude, I was there.
Real short.
I believe I did the forum in 95. It was 95 or 96. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
it was 95 because I was at the big events. I went to the one in LA where we
Yeah.
completed LEC, Landmark Education Corporation, which is what it was in that little period, from 1991 to 19 whatever. And so we completed that future and in this huge thing. And then, people, and they created the future Landmark Education 2020. I don't know when it became Landmark Worldwide. I mean, I have it somewhere, but so it becomes Landmark Worldwide eventually. Now it's Landmark Worldwide New Era, but it's all the same thing. And so, but we completed that and we created that. And here's the trippy thing. So I just think, anyway, the angels, God, the universe, great spirit, whoever has one hell of a sense of humor. So we get to when I started to really question, and I started questioning because people starting in 2018 were coming to me, but it was really 2020 when it got intense. Like 2020 is when there was a whole group that was saying, hey, we got to get out of here. We're being hurt. This is wrong, and they had started to talk to outside professionals, which is how we knew that, those practices qualify as domestic slavery, for example. I mean, I remember being on a call and figuring out that the practices and policies could, by the laws of the country they were in, be constituted as domestic slavery. And I was just like, what? So that's the kind of information. Guess when all that's happening? 2020. So, and I mean, you folks who haven't read my book, you can get my book to I tell the high level of the story in the book, but basically it was 2020 that was my wake up / betrayal year. But those betrayals are what helped me start to wake up and question, start to say, wait, really question what I'd been a part of, what I was doing. So, but at the beginning of 2020, I'm like, okay, this is it. I'm done with the being a leader in the effective exercise of leadership course. We're moving on. We're going to recreate. I have really exciting projects to do the new era. And it wasn't lost on me that it was happening in the year 2020, which is what I had constituted myself accountable for inside that organization, that I was accountable for the 2020 fulfilled. 2020 was done. We were at 2020. And so my contract was complete. And if you listen to high-level Landmark leaders, you'll hear this a lot. Alan shared about this in his world too. Like there was a point at which he was able to leave that body because his word was complete. And which starts to tell you about the concrete, the chains that the whole concept of word is in that organization, but that it was complete. And so, and we had failed. I mean, if you look at the document, I don't have mine anymore because I got rid of them all.
I don't either.
But it'll come up, it'll surface. Somebody somewhere will show it and whatever. And we, I would say they fell very, very, very short of what that document. But there's always an explanation for that because the whole world of transformation of human potential is you're always declaring something huge. They're all moonshots,
Sure.
So, and the point isn't to get to the moon. The point is all the innovation that happens as you're in the game of the moon. Like that's the whole logic system in that world. So it's a loop. You never achieve it. If you do achieve it, you just declare something bigger and greater, and then you move on and like that. So you're in that kind of thing. But I was done 2020.
There is something to be said about if you're going to the moon, if you don't leave the atmosphere, like were you ever really going to the moon?
Oh my God. No kidding. I think you got to leave the atmosphere to create the shot. But that's so funny. Okay, well, so now we're like deep into our whole year. So this is, this is kind of the stuff we're going to be talking about this year, and we've got a bunch of several really neat guests on. We're going to start talking to some people who are part of other organizations. The only
Which
reason
I'm really excited about. I can't wait to compare notes. Like just talking to the people that.
Right.
I just can't wait to compare notes. It's going to be great.
Well, that's a big part of, so I do want to say, an offer to those of you out there that are maybe listening to this and you've been a part of Landmark or another organization like it, Insight, Context. I mean, there's a lot there. Nexium, Scientology, lots and lots and lots of them where you followed a leader that has hallmarks that sound like this. that's one of the first things you can do is just start watch the vow,
Yeah.
watch things and just start to look. What you're looking for are the red flags that are similar.
Yep.
And, maybe it's not even, maybe it's a wellness group that you're a part of, or maybe it's a religious group that you're a part of, or maybe whatever it is. And there are, the point here, what I want us to really explore this year, Tony, is as we confront the line, right, between the light side and the dark side.
Yep.
But I'm healthy and unhealthy, true and not true. And kind of for me running in the background is this question, is transformation a thing? I kind of am telling you, I've been asking myself this question for a little while now. It's looking less and less like it, really. Plus, the word has been really watered down, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
So we're going to kind of take the gloves off a little bit. We are inviting, if you're out there, if you're listening and you want to come, you want to talk about your story or your experience, please reach out to us. We may or may not do that. Like, we're very, very careful to be, for me, the most important thing is the health of the person that we're talking to. So, that we're doing this, as we would say, with integrity, right? I'm very clear about, just for those of you that are out there that are wondering, I'm super, super, super duper clear about slander and defamation and
All that jazz.
accuracy, but like the real kind, not the manipulated kind. And so, we'll bring all that forth, but we want to kind of take the gloves off a little bit and start to look at the underlying ideas, examine those a little bit, and really pull the cream, the good stuff from it, and look at maybe what is ready to be retired. And so we're going to do that stuff. We're going to be talking with folks from other groups, other things, other experiences. Just keep seeing what it takes to get to that line so we can examine.
And I want to chime into something really quickly here. My intention is that you feel a little challenged by what we say. So if you're on here and you find yourself agreeing with everything we say, like, let us know, like, hey, I agreed with everything, because that's not what we want. We want you to let me think about that. Like, okay, that goes against my preconceived notion, or that goes against what I believe a little bit. Not necessarily like it's going to redefine your entire life, but I want you to feel a little bit challenged. We want you to feel a little challenged.
And I will just say, and we're fine with that, respectfully. So, I put it up on the YouTube channel. Like, if you get into personal, somebody gets into personal attacks, either on myself or any of my guests, whatnot, we will hide that, delete that, report it, whatever. And,
or I may publicly shame you personally. That's just me, though.
That's just him. Don't worry.
That's just me. I may publicly shame you. We'll see.
You do have the dark side and the light side. So but I like that. It's like, I want to challenge our thinking but not our persons.
Correct.
Every person in my book is precious, and every person's point of view has validity. It's theirs and they get to have it. I don't have to agree with it. Yep. And I hope people will pay me the same respect. And like that, I do want to see us bring some civility and kindness back to the world. And, what we can do is do that here. So we're going to do that. Some other things that I just want to mention here as we kind of wrap up, some things that got created this last year. As I was thinking about us talking today, Tony, I realized, when I published the book, I said what I said in the book. I revealed what I revealed in the book, which honestly is like an amuse-bouche to the whole meal. I mean, it just isn't even like the one that you get before they bring out the menus, right? Like, it's just a tiny bit of the story.
Get your palate going.
Yeah, exactly. And mostly because I knew what I'd been through in the 3 years that it took me to get to the place to even be able to write that and then put it out publicly. I respect that journey, and people need to be allowed to be where their journey, and that should be respected. But some things that we have created and have come out of that is, we do have a really great Facebook group. It's, Is This a Cult Book Club? You can look it up. There are questions to join. It is vetted. There are moderators. We take all that very, very seriously because we can't guarantee safety, as it were. That's not really ours to offer, but we can do what we can do to make that a safe space for people to share, to explore, to look, to examine, to question, like that. That's been a really great space for people who are kind of questioning, maybe it's the group or the ideology that they've been a part of or the leader they've been following. Maybe a little bit culty, and they're kind of wondering, and they just want some people to talk about that with in a loving, kind, honest way. So there's that. We have now, Rachel Bernstein and I have partnered to create a group. And she's a bit of a unicorn in my world because she's an incredible therapist, family and marriage therapist. She has a thriving practice that isn't all of gold. So she's really balanced and she's just fantastic at that. And she's also an educator. She's an educator in LGATs, high control groups and whatnot. And that group I'm learning so much from her, not just in how she facilitates and helps us walk through some kind of tough stuff from time to time, but also really what I've been surprised by is the amount of things that I still am like, what? Is that wrong to do that? Like like not wrong, like kind of don't like the right, wrong world, but
Sure.
it's not healthy. Is it healthy? Not healthy? Like that. So that group is really powerful and that's set up on a gifting model. So, we have a certain gift that we ask people to pay is $100 a month for 2 sessions. And then we do interview in sessions in between as well, ourselves to just talk sessions, share sessions. So that's a really powerful structure. And that's the place to go. Like when you're ready to start examining and healing. So we have we have that resource now. We have this show, right? So we started this show where we're cutting on and we're talking about stuff. So we have that resource now. I feel like I'm forgetting a big one. And I've partnered with Seek Safely. So these guys were such a lifeline for me. I can't encourage people enough to follow the Seek Safely podcast, which is brilliant. But I've now partnered with them in my new company, Illuminate, which I had started actually started it in 2016. I brought it off the shelf in 2020, had a kind of vision for it as being a marketplace mostly I wanted to create a marketplace for smaller practitioners where we could come together and bring, market together, share together, like to help build get our work out there, our wisdom out in the world. That was my original vision. I've now dedicated that to being a marketplace where people commit to the safe and ethical practice of personal development and wellness programs, products, and services. So we're starting to really get that moving. But in conjunction, we're really opening that up with a whole series of Seeking Safely offerings. So for consumers, the new Compass workshop and the Safe Practitioner workshop. So places where we can kind of roll up our sleeves and give more than performative lip service to the idea of a safe and ethical marketplace that we can really start with ourselves and training ourselves. So we're going to be talking about some of that stuff, but all of that's been built. I was kind of like, because I'm certainly not financially where I thought I was. For those of you out there getting rich, I'm still spending way more money than I'm bringing in. So we will find a way forward. And because it matters, this is important. It's just important. And it's part of my own healing process. It's part of how, my therapists and teachers have taught me, like, when you start to deconstruct something and find the wounds and heal them and whatnot, you just want to contribute. You want to give that back. So I was thinking like, gosh, we haven't done much. But this morning getting ready for this, I'm like, no, wait a minute. Look at all this stuff. It was not there last March. There was nothing.
Yep.
You could get together with a few friends. I like how you said when you get any landmark group together, you will, like, the staff members at some point will like go off in a corner and be like, yeah, that's what happened. And they'll start swapping stories and start some of everything I said in my book, all the things that are being said on our calls have been being said in 1s and 2s and 3s here and there. But to really bring it out in the open and talk about it. And I can only hope, and I continue to hope, that it will make Landmark in its future better. I know they're listening. So hopefully they will take some of these ideas. They haven't approached me directly, but hey, if they're listening, I'm talking to you too. I still think that they could be leaders in the field if they really, really took themselves on, but it would take significantly more than what they're doing. Like, they'd have to really examine themselves in it. They'd have to bring outsiders in. That's the thing. You have to bring outsiders, and then actually listen to that, not convert them. So, and that's true for any high control group organization.
Yeah.
We're going to be exploring all that. And let's see, what else am I supposed to talk about here, Tony, at the end?
So just the last thing I want to say is, if you are interested in reading Anne's book, if you haven't read it, or you're interested in anything that she talked about here, or you want to see more episodes of our podcast, you can find those as itisthisOccult.com. And you'll find all the
occult book. You have to say
itisthisOccult.com. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
itisthisOccult.com, and you'll find all the links to get a hold of Anne, to look for anything that any offers she may have. And I'll add my links to there as well. So if you want to get a hold of me in some way, shape, or form, you can find us there.
Awesome. Awesome. Another thing, Tony, we are going to set up some Confronting the Line socials, and I'm just waiting for the last little thing with the lawyers, but on the Facebook page and stuff, we are going to be setting up spaces where people can tell their stories in a way that is safe and healthy. Yep. So, because that is kind of where it starts, is saying, you know what, this happened to me. Yeah. This thing, we've been free to talk about the miracles that happened to us. And I think that's great. And I don't think we should stop there. But I think those miracles they can't be fulfilled if we can't also talk about the other things that happen, right? Or the cost of some of those or whatever it is. So, and this for me is particularly to people who have worked in organizations like this, because that's where it gets really intense, and not just Landmark, but all of them. So anyway, but we will be setting up Confronting the Line socials. So clips and things like that can be followed. And then my own personal ones as well, I'm always sharing. So what we're up to. So Tony, thank you so much. Thank you for joining me. We tried to record this with Tony gave me all this awesome advice and stuff, and just me talking was terrible because I don't like, I like talking to people. And so I just really appreciate, as always, your sharing and your being willing to come out and talk publicly now about your journey and what you're going through. Sure. I know it will make a difference for people. So thanks for doing that. And thanks to your fabulous wife who's supporting it, and your amazing son as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
This has been Confronting the Line. We'll see you next time.